When you sent the questions, I was like, this is gonna be complicated. Okay, so in college, I studied a lot of things. I started off really like kind of the typical immigrant thing of trying to like please my folks. I wanted to be a composer, but that clearly was not really, that wasn't a good idea in my dad's eyes. So I thought that I might, make a compromise and I would do not just business, but I'd do international business because I love to travel and I love languages and stuff like that. But I'll give you the Cliff Notes version, which is that I probably had a half dozen majors at Rutgers my first couple of years, and I flunked out. In fact, I failed out of Rutgers twice. I was banned from the university for 10 years. I did a little tour. I went to Middlesex County College and then Union County College. Eventually I wound up at Bloomfield College, which is a college that was across the street from Sacred Heart Church where I was baptized. So, it's also a school where I eventually got my first tenure track job there. In the ensuing time, when I was in community college, I had a teacher named Carl Kotita, and I read books for the first time. Like I really read books. Like I read books when I was in high school, but I really read them. Read Hunter Thompson and Allen Ginsberg and Ishmael Reed, and it was just like a whole other understanding of what literature was and what these figures were. And so I still didn't have it in my mind that I was any kind of writer. I was actually teaching myself jazz piano at the time, and when I got to Bloomfield College, the other thing that I was doing was I was doing television, video, and film production. And so I thought that I was going to go into communications, but in order for me to major in communications, because it was housed in the English department, I had to take literature courses. And I was like, oh man, I was really not trying to do that. Well, I had a series of teachers that just, it made art and literature so alive for me. It made a living thing out of all these genres that I felt were like rigid and stiff and had nothing to do with me. So I read Plato, and I read Shakespeare, and I read Blake, and I read James Joyce, and I was introduced to June Jordan and Robert Hayden and Anne Sexton. And in my very last, or my penultimate semester at Bloomfield College, I studied with a poet named Paul Ganega. And it was the only creative writing class I ever took until grad school. It was an intro to creative writing class, so we did all the genres. I thought that maybe I would write short stories, but I was awful at that. And Paul was like, oh, you get a chance to do it, because I was playing with language. He's like, you'll get a chance to do that when we do poetry. And I was like, poetry, I don't want to do poetry. Needless to say, something connected. I think the other thing that there's a story that goes along with this. And during this time, as I'm learning books, my mom is dying. And in the process of my mom being sick, I had to postpone my wishes to be a composer and a musician. And this is exactly when poetry arrived in my life through this class and through Paul Ganega. And all this weird stuff that I was doing with short stories and fiction was actually playing with the language. In fact, what I was doing was I was making music out of the language. I was intuitively playing with sound, just for the pleasure of it. And it turned out that I was pretty good at it. and he encouraged me at the end. You know, he wrote this sort of, everybody got kind of like this narrative about their portfolio at the end of the semester. He's like, at some point, it's probably going to be time for you to start submitting work, and there's a lot of failure and a lot of challenges, you know, rejection. That summer, which was a year and a half after my mother died, I sent out my first submission to Footwork, which was the literary journal Maria Mazziotti Gillen ran. I think it might still run. And I got third place in the Allen Ginsberg Awards. I was published in this journal with Adrienne Rich, and like the following year I decided to apply for grad school. I thought that maybe I would become a Blake scholar, but when I found out that you could do an MFA in 2 years as opposed to a PhD in 5, I decided to do an MFA, and I got, well, that's a whole other story, but I got waitlisted at Sarah Lawrence College. I ended up getting my MFA at Sarah Lawrence, and like having hardly read any contemporary poetry at all, I just felt like I was total fish out of water. Not to mention that I was from Jersey and all these people had degrees from Penn and Columbia and Reed, and I was from Bloomfield College. And literally when I was thinking about applying to PhD programs, I called up the office at the English department at Rutgers University. I was like, hey, I flunked out, but I'm graduating with honors from this college, and do you think that, you know, that I would, that like having sort of like figured out, could I get into this program? And the person on the other line was like, yeah, sure. And then they were like, what school did you graduate from? I said, Bloomfield College. And she was like, And they basically take anything with a heartbeat. You might want to think about teaching history or high school. So the whole journey was just like, you're not supposed to do this. I'm here.